My name is Alicia Turner, 34 years old, and I still cannot believe I drove 6 hours through a blizzard just to eat Christmas dinner in my parents' kitchen. When I arrived exhausted but happy, a stranger was sitting in my place at the family table. Mom simply shrugged and said, "She is alone this year." That moment changed everything about our relationship, possibly forever. If you are watching this from somewhere cozy, please hit like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you are spending your holidays this year. Is it somewhere you feel truly valued? Life in Boston had been good to me. As a financial analyst for one of the largest investment firms in the Northeast, I had carved out a respectable career over the past decade. My corner office overlooked the harbor, and my calendar was always full of meetings with clients who trusted my judgment with their money. I had built a life that looked impressive on paper, but December always pulled me back to my roots in rural Pennsylvania, to the farmhouse where I grew up. Christmas at the Turner household had always been special. Mom Deborah would spend weeks decorating every inch of the house with garlands, twinkling lights, and ornaments that told our family story. Dad Thomas would chop down a fresh pine from the back acres, dragging it in while we kids would squeal with delight. My sister Rachel and brother Michael would help string popcorn garlands that never quite made it to the tree intact, because we would eat half of them during the process. But my favorite tradition was Christmas Eve dinner. It was sacred in our family. Mom would prepare a feast that took days to complete. The dining room table would be extended to its full length, dressed in the embroidered tablecloth that had belonged to my grandmother. The good china would make its annual appearance, and each person had their assigned seat. Mine had always been on the right side, second from the end, where I could see both the tree in the living room and the kitchen doorway. It was my spot, had been, since I was tall enough to sit at the adult table. This year I had been especially looking forward to going home. The past months had been grueling at work, with market volatility keeping me at the office until late most nights. I had barely had time for a personal life. My apartment looked barely lived in, more like a hotel room than a home. The thought of my mother's cooking, my father's booming laugh, and even my siblings' bickering had been sustaining me through the long hours. I had taken special care with the gifts this year. For Dad, a rare first edition of his favorite hunting manual. For Mom, a silk scarf from a boutique in the North End that had cost more than I would admit. For Rachel, concert tickets to her favorite band that would be coming to Philadelphia in the spring. And for Michael, a custom fishing rod that had been backordered for months but had arrived just in time. The morning of December 24th, I packed my car with the carefully wrapped presents, an overnight bag, and some specialty chocolates from my favorite bakery. The weather forecast had warned of snow, but I had dismissed it. Growing up in Pennsylvania had made me confident in my winter driving abilities. 2 hours into the drive, I regretted that confidence. The snow started as gentle flurries but quickly intensified into near whiteout conditions. Traffic slowed to a crawl on the highway, with visibility reduced to just a few feet ahead. My usual 6-hour drive was stretching into 8 or more. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the steering wheel, leaning forward as if those extra inches would help me see better through the swirling snow. To distract myself from the tension, I turned on the Christmas playlist I had created specially for this trip. The familiar melodies transported me back to childhood memories. I remembered dancing around the kitchen with Mom as she baked cookies, the smell of cinnamon and vanilla filling the air. I recalled the Christmas when Dad built us a sledding ramp that was probably too steep, but gave us the thrill of our lives. I thought about the year Rachel and I had stayed up all night wrapping presents, giggling and sharing secrets until dawn. My phone buzzed with a text. I waited until I reached a rest stop to check it. Rachel had sent, "How far out are you? Mom is going crazy with preparations and keeps asking when you will get here." I smiled and responded, "Weather is awful. Still about 3 hours away. Tell Mom not to worry. I will be there in time for dinner." Rachel replied immediately, "Drive safe. Your spot at the table is waiting." That text warmed me more than the gas station coffee I had just purchased. My spot at the table. The familiar place where I belonged, no matter how far I had traveled or how long I had been away. Back on the road, the weather improved slightly. The snow continued to fall, but the wind had died down, making visibility better. I made better time than expected, and as the familiar landscape of my hometown appeared, a sense of peace washed over me. The old water tower came into view, then the church steeple, and finally the turn onto the gravel road that led to our family farm. As I pulled into the long driveway, the farmhouse looked like something from a Christmas card. Every window glowed with warm light, and the fresh snow on the roof and porch completed the idyllic scene. I could see movement behind the curtains, my family, going about their preparations, unaware that I had arrived. I sat in my car for a moment, taking it all in. Despite the stress of the drive, despite the exhaustion of the past few months at work, I was home. And for the next 2 days, nothing else mattered. I was exactly where I was supposed to be with the people who had known me my entire life. With renewed energy, I gathered my bags and gifts from the car and trudged through the ankle-deep snow to the front porch. Before I could knock, the door flew open and the warm air from inside rushed out to greet me. Dad was the one who opened the door, his tall frame filling the entrance. His face broke into a wide smile when he saw me, crow's feet deepening around his eyes. There she is. Our city girl made it through the blizzard. He wrapped me in a bear hug that lifted me slightly off the ground, the familiar scent of his aftershave bringing an instant sense of comfort. "Hi, Dad," I laughed, returning his embrace. "The roads were terrible, but I made it." He took some of my bags and ushered me inside. The house smelled exactly as it should on Christmas Eve, like pine, cinnamon, and roasting meat. The hallway was lined with family photos, many featuring me in various stages of growing up. Dance recitals, graduation, my first day at college. A visual timeline of my life. "Deb, Alicia is here," Dad called out toward the kitchen. Mom appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face was flushed from the heat of cooking, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. "Oh, you made it," I was getting worried. Her hug was briefer than Dad's, and I noticed she seemed distracted, glancing back toward the kitchen. "Sorry I am late. The weather was worse than I expected," I explained, unwinding my scarf. No problem, no problem. Dinner is almost ready. Go say hi to your siblings, they are in the living room," she said already, turning back toward the kitchen. It was not the enthusiastic welcome I had anticipated after my grueling journey, but I brushed it off. Mom was always a bit frazzled during major meal preparations. I made my way to the living room where the Christmas tree stood in all its glory, draped with the same ornaments that had adorned our trees for decades. Rachel was arranging presents underneath while Michael was tending to the fire in the fireplace. But there was also someone else, a woman I did not recognize, sitting in the armchair by the window. She appeared to be in her 50s with shoulder-length brown hair and a tentative smile. "Alicia," Rachel exclaimed, jumping up to hug me. My younger sister had always been the most demonstrative of the family. "You look exhausted. Was the drive awful?" "Completely awful," I confirmed, hugging her back. "But worth it to be here." Michael gave me a casual wave from his position by the fire. "Glad you made it." Mom was about to put out a search party. I laughed and turned my attention to the stranger, expecting an introduction. When none came, I extended my hand. "Hi, I am Alicia." The woman stood up and shook my hand. "Sandra Patel. I live next door." "Well, next door is relative out here, I suppose. About a mile down the road." "Sandra moved into the old Wilson place last spring," Michael explained. "She has been helping Mom with the church fundraiser." "Nice to meet you," I said politely, wondering if she had been invited for Christmas Eve dinner or was just visiting briefly. My question was answered when Mom called from the dining room. "Dinner is ready, everyone come sit down." We all made our way to the dining room where the table was set beautifully, just as I had remembered and anticipated. The good china gleamed under the chandelier light, and the familiar Christmas centerpiece, a wooden sleigh filled with pine cones and candles, occupied the middle of the table. Dad took his place at the head, and Mom would sit at the opposite end. I moved toward my usual spot, second from the right, but stopped short when I saw that there was already a wine glass and place setting there, and Sandra was pulling out the chair. I hesitated, confused. Perhaps the seating had been rearranged. Mom noticed my confusion as she brought in a steaming dish of potatoes. "Oh, Alicia, we put Sandra in your usual spot. She is alone this year. Her children could not make it home for Christmas." She said this casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "We figured you would be fine sitting in the kitchen. There is not quite enough room for everyone at the main table this year." I stood frozen, trying to process what she had just said. The kitchen, where we usually seated young children or overflow guests at major holidays. There is a nice place set up for you, Mom, continued, not meeting my eyes. You can still hear all the conversation from there. Dad looked mildly uncomfortable but said nothing. Rachel was suddenly very interested in arranging her napkin, and Michael was pouring wine, avoiding my gaze. Sure, I finally said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. That is fine. I walked into the kitchen where indeed a single place had been set at the small breakfast table. It was set with the everyday dishes, not the Christmas china. From this position I could see into the dining room if I leaned to the right, but I was clearly separate from the main gathering. As I sat down, I heard the conversation resume in the dining room. Laughter, the clinking of glasses, the familiar rhythm of family dinner, except I was not part of it. Mom brought me a plate of food loaded with all the traditional dishes. Here you go, honey. Everything you like. She patted my shoulder and returned to her seat at the main table. I stared at the food, my appetite suddenly gone. 6 hours I had driven through dangerous conditions, excited to be part of our family tradition. And now I was eating alone in the kitchen, while a neighbor I had never met before sat in my place. It was not just about the seating arrangement, it was what it represented. In that moment I realized that my presence was less valued than that of a neighbor, someone who had been in their lives for less than a year. The thought stung more than I wanted to admit. I picked at my food, straining to hear the conversation from the other room. They were discussing local news, church events, people I barely knew anymore. Sandra was talking about her garden plans for spring, and Mom was responding enthusiastically. I had tried to tell Mom about my promotion at work during our last phone call, and she had changed the subject after less than a minute. As I sat there, other memories surfaced. The time my parents had missed my college graduation because Michael had a baseball tournament. The way Mom had dismissed my first major financial analysis publication as nice, dear, without reading it. How they had visited Rachel 3 times in Philadelphia last year but had declined my invitation to Boston because it was too far. Had it always been this way? Had I been too busy, too caught up in my own life, to notice that I had somehow become an afterthought in my family? I took a sip of water, wishing it were wine. The kitchen felt cold despite the heat from the oven. I had never felt so alone while being so physically close to my family. Dinner continued in this disjointed fashion, with me occasionally getting up to refill my water glass or grab the salt, catching snippets of the lively conversation happening just a room away. Each time I entered the dining room, there would be a brief acknowledgement of my presence before they returned to their discussion, which seemed to flow much more naturally without me. During one such trip, I overheard Sandra saying, "My daughter Catherine is also in finance like Alicia. She works for a small firm in Chicago." "Is that right?" Mom replied with interest. "What exactly does she do there?" I paused by the doorway, water pitcher in hand. Mom had never asked me for details about my work. Whenever I tried to explain market trends or investment strategies, her eyes would glaze over. "She manages portfolios for private clients," Sandra explained. "She loves it, though the hours can be long." "That sounds so impressive," Mom said warmly. "You must be very proud." I retreated back to the kitchen, the sting of jealousy, sharp and unexpected. Why was my mother more interested in the career of a woman she had never met than in my own accomplishments? A few minutes later, Rachel came into the kitchen carrying her empty plate. "Hey, how are you doing in here?" she asked, but her tone suggested it was more perfunctory than genuine concern. "Fine," I replied, pushing my barely touched food around the plate. "Having fun out there." "Yeah, Sandra is actually really interesting. She used to work as a botanist before she retired. She has traveled all over the world studying plants." "Fascinating," I said flatly. Rachel frowned slightly. "Look, I know it is weird that you are sitting in here, but it is just for one meal. Sandra has had a rough year. Her husband died last January, and this is her first Christmas alone." I felt a twinge of guilt at this information, but it was quickly overshadowed by hurt. "I understand that, Rachel. What I do not understand is why I am the one eating in the kitchen. Why not you or Michael?" Rachel rolled her eyes. "Because you are the most adaptable." Michael would make a huge scene, you know how he gets. And I helped Mom cook all day. Besides, you are only here for 2 days before you go back to your exciting city life. There it was, the subtle dig that had become more common in recent years. The implication that because I had moved away, I was somehow less entitled to family consideration. I took time off work and drove through a snowstorm to be here, I reminded her. And we appreciate that, Rachel said, but her tone suggested otherwise. Just try to be understanding, okay? Not everything is about you. She left before I could respond, taking her plate to the sink and then rejoining the others. Through the doorway, I could see her slide easily back into her chair, immediately picking up the thread of conversation as if she had never left. I pushed my plate away, my appetite completely gone now. The festive meal I had been looking forward to for weeks had turned into a lonely reminder of my peripheral position in the family. When it came time for dessert, Mom called out, "Alicia, can you help me serve the pie?" At least this gave me something to do, a way to be useful. I joined her in the kitchen as she cut perfect slices of apple pie, adding dollops of whipped cream to each. "Everyone seems to be having a good time," I commented, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Sandra has been such a blessing," Mom said, not picking up on my tone. "She has really brought new energy to the church committee, and she has been so helpful to me with the fundraiser. She has such good ideas." "That is great," I said, wondering why my mother never mentioned any of my contributions. The check I sent monthly to help with their mortgage. The streaming services I paid for so they could watch their favorite shows. The new roof I had helped finance last year, when the old one started leaking. "Take these to your father and Michael," Mom instructed, handing me 2 plates of pie. I delivered them to the dining room, where the conversation paused briefly. Dad looked up at me with a smile that seemed tinged with guilt. "Thanks, sweetheart," he said. "The dinner was delicious, was not it?" "What I had was good," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Michael either did not notice or chose to ignore it. "Sandra was just telling us about her son Jason. He is a doctor in Seattle. Neurosurgeon." "Impressive," I said, turning to leave. "He is actually looking to invest some of his savings," Sandra added. "I told him I would put him in touch with you, Alicia, if that is okay." It was the first direct acknowledgement that I had professional expertise worth consulting. "Sure," I said, somewhat mollified. "I would be happy to talk with him." Back in the kitchen, Mom handed me my own slice of pie and a fresh cup of coffee. "You can take these back to your seat," she said. "Actually," I said slowly, "I think I will take a break. I need to stretch my legs after that long drive." Mom looked surprised, "But we always have dessert together on Christmas Eve." "You all seem to be doing fine without me," I said quietly. I took my coat from the hook by the back door and slipped outside before she could respond. The night air was bracingly cold, the snow had stopped, and the sky had cleared to reveal a canopy of stars. Our farm was far enough from town that the night sky was spectacular, undiminished by light pollution. It was one of the things I missed most about home. I walked to the old swing that hung from the maple tree in the side yard. Dad had hung it when I was 7, and somehow it had survived all these years. I brushed the snow off the wooden seat and sat down, pushing myself gently back and forth with the toe of my boot. From this vantage point, I could see through the dining room window. They were all still at the table, laughing at something Michael had said. Sandra was fitting in perfectly, as if she had always been there. As if she belonged in that chair more than I did. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Rachel. "Where did you go?" I did not reply. A minute later, another text. "Mom says to come back inside. It is too cold out there." I typed back, "I will be in soon." But I remained on the swing, watching my breath form clouds in the frigid air. The hurt I felt was shifting into something harder, a resolve that had been building for years without my conscious awareness. I had always been the reliable one, the one who left home but never really left them behind. The one who sent money, who called regularly, who drove 6 hours for Christmas Eve dinner only to be seated in the kitchen while a stranger took my place. The breaking point was approaching, and I could feel it like an oncoming storm. 20 minutes later, my fingers and toes were numb from the cold, but I had reached a decision. I would not spend the night feeling like an unwelcome guest in my childhood home. I would not wake up Christmas morning to more of the same treatment. There were hotels in town. I could get a room, spend the night in peace, and reevaluate tomorrow. I walked back to the house, stomping snow from my boots on the back porch. When I entered, they were still at the table now, drinking coffee and eating cookies that Mom only made at Christmas, filled with dates and walnuts. My favorite cookies since childhood. "There you are," Mom said, looking up. "Your coffee got cold. I can make you a fresh cup." "No need," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I am going to head out." There was a moment of confused silence. "Head out where?" Dad asked, frowning. "It is Christmas Eve." "I think I will get a room in town," I explained, trying to keep my tone casual. "I am pretty tired from the drive." "Do not be ridiculous," Mom said dismissively. "Your room is all made up upstairs, the same as always." "I appreciate that, but I think it would be better if I had some space tonight." Rachel looked at me incredulously. "Are you serious?" "Because you had to eat in the kitchen." "It is not just about dinner," I said, though that had certainly been the catalyst. "I just need some time to myself." On Christmas Eve, Michael chimed in. "Come on, Alicia, do not be dramatic." Sandra shifted uncomfortably in her seat, my seat, looking like she wished she could disappear. "Perhaps I should go," she suggested. "I did not mean to cause any disruption." "Absolutely not," Mom insisted. "This is not about you, Sandra. Alicia is just being sensitive." That word sensitive hit me like a slap. It was what Mom always said when I expressed hurt feelings as a child. "You are just being sensitive." As if my feelings were an overreaction, an inconvenience to everyone else. "I am not being sensitive," I said quietly. "I am recognizing a pattern, and I am choosing not to participate in it tonight." I turned and walked to the hall closet, retrieving my overnight bag that I had dropped there upon arrival. I had not even had time to take it upstairs. "Alicia, this is absurd," Dad said, his voice rising. "It is late, it is cold, and it is Christmas Eve." "I know what day it is, Dad. I drove 6 hours to be here for it. And now you are just going to leave because we put you in the kitchen for one meal." Rachel stood up, hands on her hips. "God, you always have to be the center of attention, do not you?" That hurt, especially coming from Rachel. We had always been close, or so I thought. "Is that what you think this is about?" "What else could it be?" she retorted. "We have a guest who is alone for the holidays. We make a small adjustment to accommodate her, and you have a meltdown." "It is not a small adjustment to me," I said, my voice finally betraying my emotion. "It is just one more sign that I am an afterthought in this family, that I do not matter as much as everyone else. Even someone you barely know." Michael scoffed. "That is ridiculous. You are being completely selfish right now." I looked at my brother, the golden child who could do no wrong. "Selfish me? That is rich, Michael. Who paid for your car repair last month? Who sends money every single month to help with expenses around here? Who financed the new roof?" A heavy silence fell over the room. Sandra looked mortified to be witnessing this family implosion. "That is enough," Dad said firmly. "We are not discussing financial matters in front of guests." "Of course not," I said, picking up my bag. "We would not want to acknowledge any of that, would we? It might make it harder to treat me like I do not matter." Alicia, Mom started, but I cut her off. "I will see you all tomorrow. Maybe. Merry Christmas." And with that, I walked out the front door, the cold air hitting my flushed face like a welcome relief. I got into my car, turned the ignition, and drove down the long driveway without looking back. I was halfway to town when my phone buzzed again. A text from Rachel. "Wow. Cannot handle being overlooked, huh?" That text was the final straw. All the years of feeling secondary, all the dismissive comments, all the times my contributions had been taken for granted, without acknowledgement, crystallized in that single message. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking with anger and hurt. I opened my banking app, navigated to the recurring payments section, and without allowing myself to second guess, I froze the mortgage assistance payment that was scheduled to go out on the 1st of the month. Next, I opened the account for the streaming services I paid for, the ones that allowed my parents to watch their favorite shows, my brother to follow sports, and my sister to binge her reality television. With a few taps, I deactivated the account. The petty satisfaction I felt was immediately followed by guilt, but I pushed it aside. For once I wanted them to feel the impact of my absence, to understand that they had taken me for granted once too often. I continued driving to the only hotel in our small town, a modest place that catered mostly to business travelers and the occasional tourist. The lobby was decorated with a small artificial tree and some tinsel, a half-hearted nod to the holiday. The receptionist looked surprised to see a guest checking in on Christmas Eve, but was professional and efficient. "Just for tonight?" she asked. "Yes, just tonight," I confirmed, though I was no longer certain about my plans for tomorrow. In my room I sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the evening replaying in my mind. Had I overreacted? Maybe. But it had not been about one dinner, one seat at the table. It had been years in the making. My phone had been buzzing consistently since I left the house. I finally looked at it. Multiple texts from each family member. From Dad, "Come back home. Whatever is wrong, we can talk about it." From Mom, "I do not understand why you are so upset. Please come back. It is Christmas." From Michael, "You are ruining Christmas Eve for everyone. Real mature." And another from Rachel, "The streaming service just went down in the middle of the movie we were watching. Did you seriously cut it off? That is incredibly childish." I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I took a hot shower, trying to wash away the hurt and anger that had been building for years. Under the stream of water, I finally allowed myself to cry, the tears mixing with the shower spray until I could not tell which was which. When I emerged, there were more messages. The tone had shifted. From Dad, "Alicia, please. I am worried about you. This is not like you." From Mom, "We just tried to make a mortgage payment, and it says the account is frozen. What is going on? We need to talk." From Michael, "Okay, I get that you are upset, but cutting off the mortgage payment, that is going too far." And finally, at exactly 10:05 in the evening, a lengthy text from Rachel that would change everything. "Ali, I know you are hurt, and I am sorry for what I said. There is stuff you do not know. Mom has been struggling with depression since her sister died last year. She did not want to tell you because you always seem so perfect with your big job and city life. Dad lost a bunch of money in a bad investment and has been too ashamed to tell you because you are the financial expert. They have been leaning hard on your help without admitting how much they need it. And yes, I have been jealous of you for years, your success, your independence." Sandra reminds Mom of her sister, that is why she is so attached to her. "I know it does not excuse putting you in the kitchen, but please come back. We are all a mess in different ways and we need you. Not your money. You." I stared at the message for a long time, the words blurring through fresh tears. All this time I had thought I was the one who did not matter, when in reality they had all been protecting their vulnerable places from me, seeing me as someone too successful, too perfect to understand their struggles. It was 10:45 on Christmas Eve, and suddenly everything looked different. I sat on the hotel bed, Rachel's text illuminating the darkness of my room. The revelation hit me like a physical force, rearranging everything I thought I knew about my family dynamic. My mother battling depression since her sister, my Aunt Louise, had passed away. My father hiding financial shame. My siblings harboring jealousy and insecurity. And me misreading all of it as rejection when it had been something else entirely. As I tried to process this new information, more texts arrived in rapid succession. From Dad, "Your mother is crying. I have not seen her cry since her sister died. Please come home, Alicia. There are things we should have told you." From Michael, "I am sorry for being a jerk. Rachel says she told you some stuff. There is more. Please come back." From Mom, "I did not mean to hurt you by putting you in the kitchen. I thought you would understand. You always understand. You are the strong one. I have been leaning on that too much. Please forgive me." Each message peeled back another layer of the family I thought I knew so well. The strong, capable parents who had raised me were human after all, with their own deep insecurities and struggles. My siblings, who I thought saw me as an outsider, were actually seeing me through lenses distorted by their own sense of inadequacy. I called Rachel, needing to hear her voice to understand more clearly. She answered immediately. "Ali, are you okay?" "No," I admitted. "I am not okay. Why did no one tell me any of this about Mom, about Dad? Rachel sighed heavily. It is complicated. After Aunt Louise died, Mom kind of fell apart, but quietly. She would look fine when you visited or when we talked to you on the phone, but then she would crash afterward. Dad did not want to worry you. He said you had your own life, your own stress. But I am family, I insisted. I deserve to know. I know that now, Rachel said. We all do. When Dad lost that money, almost $40,000 on some stupid investment scheme, he was so ashamed. You know how proud he is. And you are so good with money, so successful. He could not bear for you to know he had been so foolish. The irony was painful. So instead of turning to me for help or advice, he just hid it and accepted my money without telling me why they really needed it. Pretty much, Rachel confirmed. And then there is me and Michael. We have both felt like underachievers compared to you for years. You went to an Ivy League school, got a prestigious job, have this glamorous city life. Meanwhile, I am teaching elementary school in the same town where we grew up, and Michael is still trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life at 30. I never thought of myself as intimidating, I said, taken aback. Or my life as glamorous. Most days I am just exhausted and lonely. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You never told us that. It was true. I had always presented the most polished version of my life to my family, partly out of pride, and partly because I did not want them to worry. I had created a persona of the successful daughter who had it all together, who could handle everything, who did not need anyone else. And Sandra, I asked, where does she fit into all this? Rachel hesitated. Sandra moved onto the old Wilson property in April. She came to church, and Mom connected with her immediately. She has the same laugh as Aunt Louise, similar mannerisms. Mom said it was like having a piece of her sister back. They started spending more time together, and Sandra has been really good for Mom. She gets her out of the house, involved in activities. It is the most engaged Mom has been since the funeral. I closed my eyes, picturing Sandra in my seat at the table. It had never been about replacing me. It had been about my mother grasping at a connection that helped ease her grief. Why did not Mom just tell me this? I asked. You know, Mom. She does not talk about feelings easily. None of us do, really. It is a family trait. That was certainly true. The Turners were known for their stoicism, their ability to push through difficulties without complaint. It was something I had always been proud of, but now I wondered if it had cost us the ability to be honest with each other when it mattered most. There is something else, Rachel added after a moment. Sandra is going through chemo. That is why her kids could not come home for Christmas. They are doctors and could not get the time off, and she did not want them to see her like this anyway. Mom has been driving her to treatments twice a week. The guilt that washed over me was overwhelming. I had been so caught up in my own hurt feelings that I had not considered there might be reasons beyond what was immediately apparent. I should come back, I said. Yes, you should, Rachel agreed. But maybe first undo whatever you did to the mortgage payment and the streaming service. Dad is pretty freaked out about the mortgage. Despite everything, I found myself laughing slightly. I will fix it right now. I hung up and immediately reopened my banking app, reactivating the mortgage assistance and reinstating the streaming services. As I did so, a text came through from Michael's services back on. Thanks. And I am really sorry about dinner, and for being a jerk in general. I texted back, I am sorry too. For everything. I will be back soon. I quickly packed my overnight bag, checked out of the hotel, and drove back through the quiet, snow-covered town. Christmas lights twinkled from houses and storefronts, and the church at the center of town had a simple nativity scene on its lawn, illuminated by a single spotlight. As I drove, I thought about the masks we all wear, even with the people closest to us. My parents hiding their struggles to protect me pretending my life was perfect to impress them, my siblings covering their insecurities with bravado or resentment. What might our relationship have been like if we had all been brave enough to be vulnerable with each other? The farmhouse came into view, still lit up against the darkness. Someone must have been watching for my car because the front door opened before I had even turned off the engine. Dad stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the light from inside. I got out of the car and walked toward him, suddenly unsure of what to say. But I did not need to say anything. He stepped forward and wrapped me in an embrace tighter than the one he had given me when I first arrived. "I am so sorry," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "We should have told you everything." "I am sorry too," I said, my face pressed against his shoulder, "for reacting the way I did, for cutting off the money." He pulled back, looking down at me with eyes that were suspiciously bright. "It was never about the money, Alicia. We have been worried about you for years, working so hard, never taking time for yourself. We did not want to add to your burdens." "That should have been my choice," I told him gently. He nodded. "You are right. Come inside. Your mother wants to talk to you." I followed him into the house where the rest of my family waited in the living room. Mom stood as soon as she saw me, her face showing evidence of recent tears. "Alicia," she said, her voice breaking slightly, "I am so sorry about tonight, about everything." I crossed to her and took her hands in mine. "Rachel told me about Aunt Louise, about your depression. Why did not you tell me?" She looked down. "I did not want to be a burden. You have your own life, your own concerns." "You are my mother," I said firmly. "You could never be a burden to me." Michael stepped forward next. "And I am sorry for being such a pain in the ass. You have always been there for us, and we have taken it for granted." I smiled at my younger brother. "Language, Michael. It is Christmas Eve." He laughed, and some of the tension in the room dissipated. Rachel came to stand beside me. "Group hug," she suggested, just as she had when we were children. The four of us embraced, a tangle of arms and emotions too complex to name. When we separated, I noticed Sandra standing awkwardly by the dining room doorway. "I really should go," she said. "This seems like a family moment." "No," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "Please stay. It is late, it is Christmas Eve, and from what I hear, you are practically family now anyway." Sandra looked uncertain. "Are you sure? After everything that happened?" I walked over to her and offered my hand, not for a handshake this time, but to lead her back to the living room. "I am sure. And I owe you an apology. I made assumptions that had nothing to do with you." She took my hand with a grateful smile. "Thank you, and I am sorry for taking your seat, if I had known." "It is just a seat," I said, and meant it. "There are more important things." Mom wiped her eyes. "I think we all need some hot chocolate. And maybe some of those cookies." "I will help," I offered. As we all moved toward the kitchen, I felt something shift within me. The hurt and anger that had built up over years was beginning to dissolve, replaced by a new understanding of my family and my place within it. We were all flawed, all struggling in our own ways, all hiding parts of ourselves out of pride or fear or misguided protection. But tonight, something had broken open, allowing us to see each other more clearly for the first time in years. It was 10:45 on Christmas Eve, and we were finally beginning to be honest with each other. With steaming mugs of hot chocolate and a plate of cookies, we gathered in the living room. The Christmas tree lights cast a warm glow, and the fire Dad had built earlier still crackled in the fireplace. There was an unspoken agreement that it was time for honest conversation, for bringing long, hidden truths into the open. "I think we need to start over," Dad said, settling into his favorite armchair. "There has been too much left unsaid for too long." Mom nodded, her hands wrapped around her mug. "Alicia, I want you to know that putting you in the kitchen was never meant as a slight. I just thought of all my children you would be the most understanding." "Because I am the most accommodating?" I asked. "Because you are the strongest," she corrected. "You have always been the one who could handle anything. Even as a little girl, you were so independent, so capable. When you moved away to college, and then to Boston, you thrived. Your brother and sister stayed closer to home, but you went out into the world and conquered it." I shook my head. "That is not how it feels to me, Mom. Most days I feel like I am barely keeping my head above water. My job is demanding, my apartment is empty, and most nights I work so late that by the time I get home I am too exhausted to do anything but fall into bed." My mother looked genuinely surprised. "But you always sound so positive on the phone. You talk about your clients, your projects." "Because I did not want you to worry," I admitted. and maybe because I wanted you to be proud of me." "We have always been proud of you," Dad interjected. "Sometimes intimidated by your success, but always proud." Michael leaned forward from his position on the couch. "You know what would have helped? If you had ever talked about struggling or failing at anything. You have always been perfect, Alicia, straight-A student, successful career woman, financial genius. Do you have any idea what it is like to be your younger brother? To have teachers constantly saying, 'Why cannot you be more like your sister?'" His words stung, but I recognized the truth in them. "I am sorry, Michael. I never meant to set a standard that made you feel inadequate. I have plenty of failures, I just never talked about them." Like what he challenged. I took a deep breath. Like the fact that I have been passed over for partnership twice now. Like the fact that I had a serious relationship that ended last year because he said I was too focused on work. Like the panic attacks I sometimes get when the pressure gets too intense. The room fell silent. Rachel was the first to speak. "You have panic attacks. Why did not you ever tell us?" "Because I am supposed to be the strong one, remember," I said without bitterness. "The one who has it all together. The one who helps everyone else." Dad cleared his throat. "I owe you an explanation about the money, about why we have needed your help with the mortgage." "Rachel told me you lost money on an investment," I said gently. He nodded, looking down at his hands. "It was stupid. A friend from the factory recommended this investment opportunity, said it was a sure thing. I put in nearly all of our savings. When it collapsed, I was too ashamed to tell you. You warned me years ago about these kinds of schemes and I did not listen." "Dad," I said, moving to perch on the arm of his chair. "You should have come to me. I could have helped you figure it out without judgment." "Pride," he said simply. "My foolish pride." "And my depression," Mom added quietly. "After Louise died, I just could not seem to find my footing. Some days it was all I could do to get out of bed. The medical bills started piling up. Antidepressants, therapy. More expenses we did not want to burden you with." I looked at my mother with new eyes. The slight weight loss I had attributed to aging, the occasional cancellation of our weekly phone calls, the distracted quality in her voice, sometimes all took on new meaning. When Sandra moved in down the road, Mom continued glancing at our neighbor who had been listening quietly. It was like a lifeline. She had lost her husband, I had lost my sister. We understood each other's grief. Sandra nodded. "Your mother has been a blessing to me too, especially with the cancer diagnosis. She has driven me to every treatment, sat with me through the worst days." I turned to Sandra, the woman I had resented just hours before. "I had no idea you were going through all that. I am so sorry for how I acted earlier." "Please," she said, waving away my apology. "You had no way of knowing. And family dynamics are complicated at the best of times, let alone during the holidays." Rachel, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "While we are all confessing things, I should admit something too. I have been jealous of you for years, Alicia. Not just of your success, but of how easily you seem to move through the world. I feel stuck sometimes teaching the same grade in the same school year after year. When you visit with your designer clothes and stories about important clients, it makes my life seem so small in comparison." Her words hit me hard. "Rachel, your work is so much more meaningful than mine. You are shaping young minds, making a real difference. Most days I am just moving money from one account to another to make rich people slightly richer." She gave a small smile. "Maybe we have both been envying the wrong things." Michael stood up suddenly. "Since we are all bearing our souls tonight, I might as well tell you that I have been taking classes at the community college, business administration. I want to start my own landscaping company, but I have been too scared to tell anyone because what if I fail? What if I cannot live up to the Turner family standard of success?" "There is no standard," I said firmly. "There is just us doing our best, sometimes succeeding, sometimes failing, and we should be able to share both with each other." Mom wiped away a tear. "When did we stop talking to each other? Really talking?" "I think it happened gradually," Dad reflected. "We all started protecting ourselves, hiding our vulnerabilities, presenting our best faces to each other instead of our true selves. And in doing so, we created distance," I added. "Misunderstandings, hurt feelings." Sandra stood up. I think this is definitely a family moment. I should give you all some privacy. Mom reached for her hand. You do not have to go, Sandra. You are part of our lives now. I appreciate that, Deborah, Sandra said warmly. But I think you all need this time together. I will come back for Christmas dinner tomorrow if the invitation still stands. We all assured her it did, and Dad insisted on driving her home despite her protests about the short distance. As they left, the rest of us sat in a circle that felt both familiar and new. I think Rachel said slowly that we need to make a pact. No more hiding the hard stuff from each other. No more pretending to be perfect. No more measuring ourselves against each other, Michael added. And no more assuming we know what others are thinking or feeling without asking, I contributed. Mom nodded. It will take practice. The Turner family has never been good at vulnerability. We can learn, I assured her, reaching for her hand. Starting now. For the next hour, we talked more openly than we had in years. Mom shared the depths of her grief over Aunt Louise and the day-to-day struggle with depression. Michael revealed his business plans in detail, showing a level of thought and preparation that impressed us all. Rachel confessed her fears about being stuck in a rut and her tentative application to a master's program she had been too afraid to mention. And I told them about the loneliness of my supposedly glamorous life, the pressure I felt to maintain the image of success, and my growing uncertainty about whether corporate finance was truly my calling. By the time Dad returned, something had shifted permanently in our family dynamic. The careful facades we had maintained for years had begun to crumble, revealing the authentic, imperfect people beneath. It was uncomfortable at times, even painful, but also profoundly freeing. As the clock approached midnight, signaling the arrival of Christmas Day, we found ourselves emotionally exhausted, but somehow lighter. The distance that had grown between us over the years had begun to close, not completely, but enough to allow for hope. I think we should all get some sleep, Mom suggested. It has been an eventful evening. Where will you sleep, Alicia? Rachel asked. Your room is still ready. I smiled at my sister. I think I will stay here after all. It is Christmas, and I want to be home. As we all headed upstairs to our childhood bedrooms, Dad pulled me aside for a moment. Thank you, he said simply. For what, I asked. For leaving tonight, he replied, surprising me. If you had not, we might have gone on like this for years. Sometimes it takes a disruption to see the truth. I hugged him, understanding what he meant. Merry Christmas, Dad. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. See you in the morning. As I lay in my old bedroom surrounded by relics of my childhood, I thought about the journey of this Christmas Eve. What had begun as a hurt over a seat at the table had evolved into something much more significant, a reckoning long overdue. Our family had begun the hard work of seeing each other clearly, with all our flaws and fears exposed. It was not a complete resolution, not yet. There would be more conversations needed, more habits to break, more truths to tell. But it was a beginning, and that felt like the best Christmas gift I could have received. Christmas morning dawned, clear and bright sunlight reflecting off the fresh snow to create a dazzling brightness outside my window. For a moment I lay still, taking in the familiar sights of my childhood bedroom, the bookshelf still lined with my favorite novels, the bulletin board covered with faded ribbons and photographs. The events of the previous night came rushing back, and I felt a mix of emotions. Embarrassment at my dramatic exit, gratitude for Rachel's revealing text, and a tentative hope about what might be possible for our family going forward. I made my way downstairs, following the scent of coffee and cinnamon rolls, a Christmas morning tradition. Mom was already in the kitchen, her hair tied back, wearing the apron I had given her 2 Christmases ago. Merry Christmas, I said from the doorway. She turned, a genuine smile lighting her face. Merry Christmas, Alicia. Did you sleep well? Better than I expected, I admitted. Need any help? You could set the table. In the dining room, please. All of us together today. The simple statement meant more than she could know. I nodded and began gathering plates and silverware. Not the fancy Christmas china this time, but the everyday dishes that held their own kind of comfort. Dad came in from outside, bringing with him a rush of cold air and the smell of pine. Just checking on the barn, he explained. Merry Christmas, Alicia. Merry Christmas, Dad. Rachel and Michael appeared soon after, both still in pajamas, looking younger than their years. We exchanged somewhat awkward good mornings, the rawness of last night's confessions still fresh. So Michael said, breaking the ice, as we all sat down to breakfast, "Are we doing presents before or after Sandra comes for dinner?" "Before, I think," Mom replied. "Just us for that part." After breakfast, we gathered in the living room around the tree. The gift exchange was different this year, each present opened with a new awareness of the giver and the meaning behind their choice. When Rachel opened the concert tickets I had bought her, she looked up with tears in her eyes. "You remembered. I mentioned this band once on the phone months ago." "Of course I remembered," I said. "I listen when you talk, Rachel, even if I have not always shown it well." Michael seemed genuinely moved by the fishing rod. "This is professional grade, Alicia. This must have cost a fortune." I shrugged. "You mentioned wanting to take your students on fishing trips next spring. I thought you should have the right equipment." "My students," he repeated, looking surprised. "You pay attention to my work." "I always have," I told him. "I just have not been good at showing it." When my parents opened their gifts, the expensive rare book and silk scarf suddenly seemed shallow in light of what I now knew about their struggles. Next year I promised myself I would choose gifts that spoke more to who they really were, not just what I thought would impress them. My own gifts from them were modest but thoughtful. A hand-knitted scarf from Mom that must have taken hours to make despite her depression. A carved wooden box from Dad that he had obviously made himself. Simple photo frames from Rachel and Michael containing pictures of us as children. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the personal nature of their gifts. "These mean a lot to me." After the presents were opened and the wrapping paper cleared away, we all pitched in to prepare Christmas dinner. The kitchen became a hub of activity, with each of us taking on different tasks. There was still some awkwardness, moments of stepping on each other's toes, both literally and figuratively, but there was also laughter, real laughter, that had not been present in our interactions for longer than I could remember. Sandra arrived in the early afternoon, bringing a homemade apple pie and a genuine warmth that I could now appreciate. We welcomed her properly, all of us, and when we sat down to dinner, there was a place for everyone at the main table. No one in the kitchen, no one left out. The meal was delicious, but it was the conversation that made it special. We talked about real things, important things, fears and hopes and memories. Sandra shared stories about her late husband that had us alternating between tears and laughter. Mom spoke openly about her sister's stories I had never heard before about their childhood adventures. Dad revealed his dream of returning to woodworking, now that he was nearing retirement, showing a passion I had not seen in him for years. As the day progressed into evening, I found myself sitting on the porch swing with Rachel wrapped in blankets against the cold, watching the stars emerge in the winter sky. "Do you think we can keep this up?" she asked, "being honest with each other?" "I hope so," I said. "It will take work. We have all gotten so used to our roles, our masks." "Your mask was the successful, independent sister who had it all together," Rachel observed. "Mine was the bitter, jealous sister who resented your success. Neither was the whole truth." "No," I agreed. "The truth is always more complicated, is not it?" We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching our breath form clouds in the cold air. "I applied to that master's program," Rachel said suddenly. "The one in educational leadership. I found out yesterday that I got in." "Rachel, that is amazing!" I exclaimed. "Why did not you tell everyone?" She shrugged. "I was going to, but then everything happened with you and dinner and, well, it did not seem like the right time." "We should go back in and tell them now," I urged. "This is big news." She hesitated. "It is in Philadelphia. I would have to move, take a leave from teaching. It is going to be expensive." "And you are worried about how to make it work?" She nodded. "I have some savings, but not enough. I was thinking of asking for your advice, actually, about loans, scholarships, that kind of thing." I felt a surge of happiness that she would turn to me for help. "Of course, we will figure it out together. That is what sisters do." Inside, the announcement of Rachel's acceptance was met with enthusiastic support from everyone. Mom immediately began talking about helping her look for apartments in Philadelphia while Dad offered to drive the moving truck. Michael suggested they could be roommates as he had been considering a transfer to a university in the city to finish his business degree. "Look at us," Mom said, a hint of wonder in her voice. "Actually making plans together, supporting each other's dreams." "It only took a complete Christmas Eve meltdown to get us here," I joked, but there was truth behind the humor. As the evening wound down, Sandra prepared to leave, hugging each of us warmly. "Thank you for including me in your family Christmas," she said. "It has meant more than you know." "You are always welcome here," Mom told her, and I found myself nodding in agreement. After Sandra left, the four of us sat around the fireplace, the Christmas tree lights, providing the only illumination in the room. It felt like a sacred moment, a new beginning. "I have been thinking," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I have a lot of vacation time saved up that I never use. Maybe I could come home more often. Not just for holidays but regular weekends too." "We would love that," Mom said, her voice thick with emotion. "And maybe you all could visit me in Boston sometimes," I continued. "I could show you around, introduce you to my world there." "I would like that," Dad said. "To see where you live, what your life is like." "It is not as glamorous as you think," I warned them. "My apartment is nice but small. My work is demanding. But I would love to share it with you, the real version, not just the highlights." Michael looked thoughtful. "Maybe that is what we all need to do. Share the real versions of our lives, not just the parts we think will impress each other." "Exactly," I agreed. "No more performing, no more hiding." 1 year later, I stood on that same porch watching snow fall gently on the familiar landscape of the farm. So much had changed in 12 months. Rachel was thriving in her master's program in Philadelphia, living in an apartment that Michael shared on weekends while he finished his business degree and worked on his business plan. Dad had converted the old tool shed into a woodworking studio and was selling his handcrafted items at local craft fairs. Mom had found a combination of therapy and medication that was helping manage her depression, and her friendship with Sandra, who was now in remission, had deepened into a true source of support for both of them. As for me, I had made partner at my firm, but more importantly, I had renegotiated my work schedule to allow for regular trips home. Once a month without fail, I made the 6-hour drive to Pennsylvania, no longer dreading family dynamics, but looking forward to genuine connection. I had also started being more honest about my own struggles and insecurities, not just with my family but with friends and colleagues as well. The freedom that came with dropping the mask of perfection was life-changing. The lesson I learned that Christmas Eve was one I would carry with me forever. True family connection cannot exist without vulnerability. The walls we build to protect ourselves ultimately become our prisons, cutting us off from the very people who could help us heal. As I watched my family move about inside the warm, light-filled house, preparing for another Christmas Eve dinner, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. This year there would be no question about seating arrangements, no unspoken resentments, no carefully maintained facades. Just a family, imperfect and beautiful, learning how to love each other better. The journey had not been easy. There had been setbacks, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves, difficult conversations that left us all emotionally drained. But we had committed to the process, to seeing each other clearly and loving each other anyway. That was the gift we had given ourselves last Christmas, a gift that continued to unfold in unexpected ways. The courage to be seen, the grace to see others, and the wisdom to know that both are necessary for love to truly flourish. Have you ever experienced a holiday moment that changed your family dynamic forever? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that family healing is possible even after years of misunderstanding. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and may your holidays be filled with authentic connection and genuine love.